on the side right now. You can find these slides at the tiny URL at the bottom if you're interested in them. So MEV-Wallet, what MEV-Wallet? So in an idolized transaction flow, you sign your transaction, you broadcast it to a mempool, it goes to your externally owned account, and then it goes to Uniswap. But in reality, what happens is that it takes a little detour through the searchers, and they put it in a sandwich, and then it goes to your account, and then it goes to Uniswap, and you end up a lot more sat than you would have otherwise been. So MEV-Wallet kind of shortcuts this process and says, if I'm just paying searchers in order to sandwich me anyway, I might as well just pay the searchers to sandwich me and skip this whole mempool thing. And MEV-Wallet adds in some new stuff to help you be a little less sad about the process. So the other question is, why MEV-Wallet? Notionally, blocks are composed of transactions, and they go in the order of tipping. Higher tip, higher in the block, lower tip, lower in the block. But ever since we got this whole Flashbots thing, there's actually been two different block space markets. High MEV transactions go at the top of the block, and then low MEV transactions, and then high tips, and then low tips. So there's actually two different ways to get your transaction confirmed. One is by paying a tip to the block proposer, and the other is just by making a little bit of MEV. Just sprinkle a little MEV on it. So your Uniswap transaction of your bad trade for that terrible shitcoin is going very high in the block because you're making a ton of MEV. And the searcher's going to go sandwich it. They're going to make sure your transaction confirms very fast because they're going to make a bunch of money by taking it from you. So you could have not made MEV and ended up in the bottom half of the block, and that would have been fine. You could have made some MEV and not paid a tip, ended up in the top half of the block. That would have been fine, but less fine. But if you use MEV-Wallet, you can have the best of both worlds. So how do we do this? We're going to directly shortcut the mempool, send the transaction right to searchers, they're going to sandwich us, and we're going to put a little bit of extra MEV in our transaction, and then send it to Uniswap. So when you're sending your transaction to the searchers, you're creating implicit MEV. What you're doing is creating a little bit of MEV. And using MEV-Wallet, you're going to create explicit MEV. You're going to say, I want to create 1 ETH of MEV. And you're thinking, why would I want to create extra MEV on top of the MEV I'm already making? And the answer is, you really don't want to, but you don't have to make positive explicit MEV. You can do negative explicit MEV. So you can say, I want to add negative 1 ETH of MEV to this transaction. And you can force the searcher to refund you 1 ETH before they even process your transaction and put it in the sandwich. So a normal ETH transaction looks kind of like this. There's a 2 data value, so like 2 Uniswap with my bad trade and 100 ETH. And an MEV transaction's exactly the same thing, but instead of a tip that goes to the block proposer, we add some MEV. We sprinkle a little extra MEV on it. Every transaction implicitly creates MEV somehow, and that's attached to the transaction whether you like it or not. So when you're making your bad trade on Uniswap, like I do every day, you're creating about 5 ETH extra MEV, and you're just giving that away to the searchers. So in a normal transaction, you're going to pay that 5 ETH, and you're going to pay an extra 0.1 ETH in transaction fees. With MEV-Wallet, you're going to pay that 5 ETH, and you're going to get 4.5 back from the searcher. You're going to demand that they pay you 4.5 ETH before your Uniswap transaction can go on chain at all. And so net, the person not using MEV-Wallet is going to pay 5.1 ETH, and the person using it's going to pay half an ETH. You're going to end up saving a ton of money by reclaiming the MEV that you're creating anyway with your very bad trading strategy. So how do we do this? Every MEV transaction is going through a smart contract wallet, and the phases here have a few steps. First, the searcher is going to fund. So if you're doing negative MEV, they're going to pay you up front. Then the transaction gets validated, and then the transaction gets executed, and then there's the fee settlement after the fact. So searcher funding is really easy. We're going to force them to provide an exact amount of value. Even if I have 0 ETH, I can force the searcher to provide 5 ETH that I'll then use to pay them later, because I'm creating MEV. And if I'm creating enough MEV, they're going to pay me any amount of ETH to get access to it, up to the amount of MEV I'm creating. So transaction validation, MEV-Wallet lets you do things that normal wallets don't. You can check the timing. And with an MEV-Wallet, you can make transactions that are only good after a certain date or only good before a certain date. You can't do that with normal transactions either. You're going to execute the transaction. This is pretty simple Solidity. It just calls a contract and then returns what it returns. But the trick here is that, this seems a little crazy. You don't usually want a contract call to just revert on failure. In a normal wallet, you would pay for that failure. You pay for reverts. If your Uniswap trade fails, you pay for it. But when we're going with MEV, searchers do not include reverted transactions. So if your transaction reverts, you pay nothing. With a normal wallet, you pay the fee. With MEV-Wallet, you pay nothing. And so after the transaction executes, after you've made your bad Uniswap trade, MEV-Wallet handles reimbursing the searcher whatever value they put up, plus the transaction fee, but the absolute minimal transaction fee. And it does this by creating MEV that the searcher can then claim. If the net fee is negative, it claims MEV for the user. So if you've created 500 USDC of MEV, you might end up with a little more ETH than you started with, because you've created a bunch of MEV in USDC and you've gotten paid for it in ETH. So MEV-Wallet is also good for block building, but I'm going to gloss over that part of the presentation and go straight to the end, because I want to talk about questions, if anyone has questions. I don't like giving 20-minute talks. I like giving 10-minute talks. Does anyone have questions about the things I just said very quickly? Yes? So how do you determine the profit the MEV searcher gets? So the answer is that you as the user probably don't determine their profit. You're making your trade. It's going to create some amount of MEV, and you're probably not sure exactly how much. You're going to let the searchers decide whether they will accept your tip or not. You're going to say, I'm willing to pay up to 0.1 ETH for this, and the searchers can then choose whether or not to accept it. If you know that you're going to create a lot of MEV, you make that negative. If you think you're not going to, you make it positive. I'm also working on a real-time bidding system that works similar to advertising auctions and page loads. So you can go out and ask 20 searchers what their tip would be, and then you can accept some of those. So that helps you figure out as a user what the appropriate amount of MEV to create is. Other questions? No? Cool. I don't mind getting off stage. All right, thanks so much. I'll just be around here for a few minutes, and then I'm going to go eat dinner and probably start drinking.